T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Welcome back to another episode of the Midheaven Podcast, Season 2. All right, I want you to contemplate, like, this is Hades and Hermes. Like, nowhere in recorded history have they really come together like they're coming together right now to break down the occult and the truth. You know what I'm saying?
Nowhere have you seen as much debauchery as you see on this, and diversity, right?
Shout out to Mr. Brennan, the Astrology Podcast. We're coming for you.
I know.
We're coming for you, slowly but surely. Okay.
He has a Scorpio stellium, right? He has a Scorpio stellium.
I didn't know. I don't know his chart. I know. Yeah. I can imagine they're
I'm pretty
amazing.
sure he does. I think he has some hitter planets in Scorpio.
Shout out to that generation too, paving the way. That's what's up. I like to think of them as astrologers, and I feel like they study the stars and we like summon the stars. Like we actually bring it to life in a way that they do, but they're more like critical, like they bring a much more hierophant edge to it. You know what I mean? Like a more orthodox.
Don't sell yourself short, Mike. We're leveling up a little bit.
We're getting there, for sure.
There's some technical conversations in this podcast. Yeah. I mean, the astrology world is so interesting to me because like you have the people that are like lecturing and publishing and like teaching and like they're going that direction, and it's, you know, like I joke, but it's like the old guys with the ponytails at some of the,
which is
events.
Necessary. You know, it has its need.
And then you have like your astrology shitlord entertainers that are like, I'm an astrologer, but I'm a comedian, but I'm a DJ, but what?
But
like
I'm a prophet.
Yeah, but there are these people who do that, or they're like,
but I'm the goddess Isis.
There's that, and I kind of feel like I'm proud to be somewhere in the middle, like. I'm definitely not someone you want to go toe-to-toe with astrologically because I feel like I will smoke some motherfuckers. And I will...
Y'all have to understand, like, there's astrology, reading the chart. Like, there's reading what is this planet in this sign, and then there's Candace. Like, oh, shit, the internet's down. Let me pull up the chart for this. Okay, in 5 minutes, the internet's going to come back. And in my head, I'm like, really? And in 5 minutes, I'm like, damn!
Because I like using astrology in like a scientific method. Like
hella practical.
Like tried and true, like looking at patterns, studying patterns, like looking at history. Like that's something that really interests me.
Yeah.
But I feel very strongly that like Pluto going into Aquarius soon is going to bring like a whole new generation of astrologers. Like they're already happening. Like we're seeing like the Pluto and Leo astrologers kind of fading out a little bit, and then
their work is done.
The Pluto and Scorpio people are like, "What's up?" And the Pluto and Sag people are like, "Fuck you,
Burn
fuck this. Look at my outfit. Let's talk about horoscopes." Like it's it's a very interesting time in astrology.
Shout out to Marin Altman. Yeah, she a Pluto Sag.
Yeah, she always does the look.
She let me read her chart. She's cool.
She's got Lilith on her midheaven.
Yeah, she's sexy too. Yeah, she got the Scorpio MC.
Yeah.
She knows what she's
doing. Right?
She's Virgo. Yeah, she knows what she's doing. Luna Diva. That's what's up.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I'm kind of hoping like I'm going to enter my villain era soon.
The villain era of Hades. You know what's interesting too? Like, in a way, if you want to see the fundamental difference between us too, like I'll take the abstract concepts and I'll break it down into basic surface level, and then she takes the what's on the surface and she'll like break down the details and specifics. So I can be a little bit vague. I'll be like, this is what it is, and she'll be like, this is how specifically and exactly
this is what it means.
And what it means specifically. I'm like the word and she's like the meaning in the dictionary. So there you go.
I mean, I think this is such a cool episode because I mean this is something I've been like looking at for a while. Like I've been studying this cycle of like the retrogrades in Gemini since 2020, knowing that both due to like the Venus retrograde and then also the eclipses that we had in Gemini, that this was like the finale, the Mars retrograde in 2022. So this video, just so you guys know, we're going to break it down into two. We'll do another one as we get closer. We'll talk about how it's going to affect the 12 signs, so stay tuned for that. That's going to be coming closer to September. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at Mars in the sign of Gemini, talk about it archetypally, make some predictions, and take a look at some of the aspects that Mars is going to be making while it spends almost 7 fucking months in the sign of Gemini.
That's just too long, too, because you can only take Gemini in like trace amounts. You can't have too much of Gemini. And the last thing I'm going to say is, She studies horary, guys. Be very careful about someone who actually studies horary. Like, there's astrology, and then there's like the deep end, and like, yeah.
Once you start studying like horary, it ruins your fucking life. Because in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, I can go bet on like sports and horses, and then also in the back of my mind, I'll be like, is this person lying to me? And then like cast the chart. Like you go to some really dark places when you start looking at
and then you find what you're looking for, and that's where it's like, oh shit, I can't unknow
especially
this.
like missing objects. That's been something that's been really interesting. I've been really fascinated by that. So whenever I lose something, I've gotten into the habit of being like, because I'm very forgetful, I'll like cast the chart for it. So I'm actually getting much better at it, and it's good. Yeah, for me.
That's terrifying too. It is what it is. Like, I cast a horary chart. You're gonna do this in 2 days. Like, what?
Yeah.
Oh shit, she was right. So
it's also really great at like seeing people's like true like intentions as well, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll really come through when you're like asking questions about people. Yeah.
That's very deep. That's very deep. I can't. The first person to bring that to my awareness was a Scorpio, like years ago. And he was huge on it. He was like, "Oh my gosh, like yeah, I can just do this with sports." But and he had just got into it, so he was like, "This is the power of this," and I was so excited. I was like, "Oh, I got to get into that." And now I see you're into it, and so yeah, that's
what's
awesome.
wild is that like in like traditional astrology, like in like Hellenistic times, you would learn horary before you learn natal charts.
That's so deep.
So for me, it's like
sense.
Learning natal charts. Okay, cool. I could do that in my sleep. Transits, like I can talk about it without looking at a chart. But like it totally warped my mind, and I had to like twist myself in and out of just mental gymnastics, trying to like figure out and understand all of the rules to horary. So yeah, shout out to Nightlight Astrology.
It's dope. It's as a science, like I've reached that threshold, which I know you've crossed. It's like you finally got it down to a science, and now there's mastering the science. That's where I'm at. It's like in another year and a half, I'm gonna be a whole supervillain. You know, the mad scientist in the lab. That's gonna be me. I'm not there yet, but I just got it down to a science.
Books.
Oh yes, it's a wrap. Ha ha ha, Dr. Peace.
Dr. Peace. You gonna get a pussycat and like keep it on your lap and pet it?
A lab coat and a mustache. I'm gonna just get a fake mustache and a lab coat on top of my real mustache. I won't even cover it. But as far as Mars and Gemini,
Speaking of villains.
Speaking of villain eras, I got Pluto about to go through my MC. That's my whole villain era. So I'm getting used to the concept of being hated globally. But I've seen it happen to Trump and Ye, so I'm looking forward to it. We'll see. But other than that, tell me if you feel this about Mars and Gemini. Because Mars and Gemini is facilitating this crazy change. Everything that happened 2021 had a lot to do with North Node Gemini.
Yeah.
And so we saw the last year and a half, people lose their job, people threaten to lose their livelihood, people die, people get injured, and people kind of just get confused by certain things that were said that now is being reversed. Like, hey, remember that stuff that you said that we said was wrong? Well, we're saying it now too. And I feel like that's Mars and Gemini. It's like everyone coming to terms with the shift, and that kind of being a catalyst for a lot of chaos.
So Mars being the planet that's like very like linear, right? It's like masculine. It's wanting to charge into battle or have conflict or whatever. I was talking about this on my channel. Like Mars and Gemini, I feel like can do a lot more damage with words than it can physically. So this is like a very kind of like witty, sometimes like kind of snippy, very intellectual but changeable Mars placement. So I think that what's fascinating also is like it's going to activate eclipse points. So we know that eclipses really do unfold in periods of cycles. We had a lunar eclipse at 8 degrees of Gemini. I think that was in 2021. And we had a solar eclipse in Gemini that was in also 2021, and that was around Thanksgiving. So if you go back and you look at some of the eclipses that have been happening over the last 2 years, both of these degrees are going to be triggered. Especially, I'm really interested in that 8 degrees eclipse. I can't remember exactly what year it was from. Now I'm kind of like questioning like when it was, but It was either 2020 or 2021. So we had that full moon lunar eclipse at 8 degrees. And this is where the shadow begins. So actually, it will station at 8 degrees when comes into shadow at 8, but it'll retrograde all the way back to 8. So in the spring, in March, when the Mars retrograde ends, it'll station at 8 degrees. So it's still bringing up like 2 years of eclipses. By the time we get to 2023, 3 years of eclipses.
Damn.
And, you know, Mars and Gemini documents traveling. I think of like, you know, passports that were required that had to do with Mars-related things like needles. I also question the media and if there's going to be more of this talk of like fake news and like division in the media, because Gemini is going to be, you know, like podcasts and TV and news networks and all that stuff. And Mars is going to make quite a few interesting aspects in the midst of its transit. I was looking, actually earlier today, I was looking at the Ingress chart right when Mars enters into Gemini on August 20th, and just hours later, the moon going also through Gemini, coming into a square with Mercury and Neptune. So like, holy shit, like off the bat, August 20th, like that Ingress chart with moon square Neptune, moon square Mercury, and Mercury is the traditional ruler of Gemini. As we watch this Mars transit, it's also really important that we're looking at Mercury. So I think that the Mercury retrograde in Virgo, Libra to Virgo, is also a really big piece of the puzzle. And I think what we're going to see is like, there's a real challenge between like walking the walk and talking the talk. And Mars in Gemini is really, it's like a smooth talker. But when it squares Neptune and we see it make other oppositions or squares to mutable placements, I think we're going to see issues with like twisted words, like, you know, falsehoods, like people not being completely forthcoming.
Or being exposed for that, huh?
Being exposed for that, yeah.
Or based off stuff they said. And
yeah.
We know that Kobe died 2 years ago when Mars was in Sag. I feel like there could be more indirect insight related to that. Maybe not related to the crash itself, but maybe helicopter flying. I know that's super vague, but I just feel like the opposition from that Mars in Scorpio might kind of reveal not just that, but everything that happened 6 months prior to that event. Because this is definitely post-eclipse in Gemini revelation. And I think you bringing up the moon square Mercury in the Ingress is like pushing a revolving door into totally changing our perspective. And that's the most important thing we want to look at into the Ingress of Mars. It's going to be followed by the new moon in Virgo. Like the new moon in Virgo is
square.
Right.
Square Mars.
That's going to be a thing.
Mutable squares are like, I don't have anything.
They're
mutable.
messy.
I don't have anything mutable in
messy
my chart, so for me, it's like really hard to comprehend that because I'm like a very black and white person. But
yeah.
I recognize that mutable squares bring about the fact that's like, hey, maybe we don't know everything. You know, maybe we don't have all the facts. Maybe things are changing. Maybe we need to be flexible. And this is the signs that deal with the changing of the season. So we're actually going to see things turning over, winding down, dying off before new things are going to be initiated as we're going into the fall equinox.
Yeah. And if we take into account Virgo and Gemini, to me, that's like taking off training wheels and now you're not riding on training wheels. So that's like the change. It's like you still need the momentum and you're so used to the training. Now you're changing the way you do something you've always done, taking it to the next level. Or it's like maybe you've spent your whole life reading cards. Now you're applying your card reading ability socially with people. Now you're seeing the major arcana with people without having to read cards. It's like changing the definition of how you understand what it is you've always known. And I think it's going to be great development for people, but socially it's like now we're understanding details to things that weren't as clear because they were hidden from us because there was the Neptune fog. And, you know, the potential for chaos is there in the way that people will react. But I see this as more of a positive thing because, you know, for those who have been suppressed, for those who've already kind of had details, this is bringing us like more pieces of the puzzle to complete what we have already like compiled, regardless of what you believe. And that'll bring everyone one step closer to being on the same page. It's just while this happens, I can imagine people will be more divided and like conflicting in opinions than ever.
Well, I mean, we're going to see some positive aspects as well.
Yeah.
I think Mars also making trines to Saturn, and also in the midst of Libra season, we're going to see some trines to both like the Sun in Libra, Venus in Libra, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of those, you know, Sun, Mars, Saturn trines, because I feel like that's really going to open up communication. It's going to allow us to be better partners. Like, there's a lot of good things that can come from that. Not so thrilled about 2 or 3 squares between Mars and Neptune. I feel like that's depreciating energy levels, really shitty weather, bad visibility. And just looking back, I mean, I know the last time we had a Mars retrograde was 2007 going into 2008.
Really?
The end of 2007 in Gemini. It was in Gemini.
The last time? Oh, the last Mars is retrograde in Gemini.
Yeah, the last retrograde Mars we had was summer of 2020, and that was in Aries. The last time we had it in Gemini was from the late degrees of Cancer into the like last 5 or 6 degrees of Gemini. And that went from like the end of 2007 to the beginning of 2008. And then we had the 2008 housing market crash.
Wow.
And all the shit hit the fan in February of 2008. So
that kind of looks like the market now.
Well, Mars has connections to property.
Yeah.
Mars has connections also to money spending, you know, resources. It's got connections to Scorpio. It can be like that we think something's going to go one way and it goes another. And I think that that's going to represent that duality and like the two sides of the coin to Gemini. I don't have high hopes for what it's going to do financially. I feel like that factored in with a whole slew of eclipses that are coming in the fall in Scorpio and Taurus. Yes, Mars is second house to the North Node, so we do need to talk about money, talk about resources. We need to, be more vocal about things, looking through our documents. But all of the inconjuncts and the quincunxes that it's going to make to the South Node in Scorpio, ruled by Mars, and also the eclipses that will be in Scorpio in the fall, it's just going to bring up that like dynamic that we see literally between, Gemini and Scorpio, where they're both kind of like bumping heads, Yeah, no, and Gemini is like, let's just stay on the surface, and Scorpio's like, we're going to hell.
We're going to the depths. We're getting to the bottom of this. We're getting to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
And Gemini not trying to go beneath the surface of the water. We're like, can we just like skirt above the surface? Like, this is just what it is. Isn't that all enough? And Scorpio's like, nope.
I think we're going to see like lots of scandals involving documents. Like that's the feeling that I'm getting, is like lots of scandals with documents and things that people said that might have been manipulated with the Mars square Neptune, and things that have been edited heavily. And like I said, we're going to see the return of like the, fake news. And because we're going to see more things unfolding pertaining to the eclipses, if you guys think that you haven't seen anything, we called it. We were like, watch Trump, and then Trump got raided. So it's like, this is really going to be hitting his chart quite significantly, because...
And probably through him, he'll be embodying the Mars archetype. So
yeah,
that'll be very interesting.
Well, and Mars for him is, the ruler of his 4th house. So that's about like endings and home and like family. And then also it rules Aries for him. So that has connections obviously to his 9th house of like legality. Yeah. I wonder if there's going to be some stuff going on legally in regards to stuff pertaining to his home or his family, which is kind of already happening.
We want to look at Senator Rand Paul, who called out Fauci. He's going through a Saturn return in Aquarius, and his moon's in Gemini. So
Rudy Giuliani also, who has been really, he's tried to become a full-fledged journalist since all of the shit that's happened with Trump and trying to, bring stuff out. So anybody, it's not just, these people out in the world, but anybody who's got some real prominent placements in Gemini, Sun, Moon, Rising, but also if you have anything
Mars,
between
Venus,
8 and 26 degrees, especially 8 or 26, because it's going to station on those degrees.
And then we know Aldebaran, the Archangel Michael star, is 8 to 10 degrees. So that's also very pivotal if we talk about the, the angles, the Aldebaran, Antares. What you said was very key, especially with the square to Neptune. What I want you to open to the concept of something revealed to us that might be forged, like something we're shown that was written, and by the time we realize it was fake, that might be when Mars goes through the shadow period. So the effect of tricking you to react to it before you realize it's real can beforehand put you more in a mind state to make sure what you're shown is verified before you act off on it.
Especially documents.
Especially documents.
Documents, leases, buying cars, renting cars, tickets, anything in regards to travel, and verification. I wonder if that's going to be like a big thing on social medias, like, you know, whether or not we need to have like more push for like verification of certain individuals. I know that like we're starting to see like 2-step verifications on Facebook, which is like, come on, fucking so Mars and Gemini. It's like you need another way to get in. Like doubles may literally manifest in some of these situations, or we're gonna see like, I don't know. I think we're gonna see like that we find out that some documents that we thought were legitimate, they're not, or like whatever.
So there's one thing I really want to talk about with this transit, and that's war. To be honest, I think Mars and Gemini is
it's America's. It's on the top of America's 7th house Mars, in a square to transit Neptune, and a square to, you know, natal Neptune. I mean,
so America's involvement in war too. I think we may be revealed the theater of war that's been happening in the war room that wasn't told to civilians. And, you know, I think the narrative and the story of war starts in Gemini. So it's already, because Mars returned in Capricorn, Russia invaded Ukraine, versus in Taurus, now there's money being sent to Ukraine. But I think Mars in Gemini in the retrograde is going to change the environment to prepare everyone to take their sides and to actually, when Mars goes direct, move forward with this. But before I talk about war, I don't know why I just got inspired to talk about sex work. I think like OnlyFans and like people who are integrating sex work into culture, this might be the seeds of a sexual revolution happening under our nose, in the way sex is solicited, in the way that sex work is more mainstream and also expressed in a more accessible way.
You're about to see a return of the phone sex hotlines?
That too.
I think of like Mars and like Gemini, you know, or Venus and Gemini is like very,
that's
like,
$1 million
talk.
idea that she just dropped on y'all right now. And if any of you can invest in like a phone sex hotline idea and renovate it, there's so many
especially
ideas
like, you know, with the squares to like Neptune, I could see like if you were to call like a phone sex line and you could like pick your accent, like imagine like, I want to talk to, you know, like an Australian.
Yo, she's like, giving you like $1 million idea right now. If anyone can invest in that, if I had like $1 million to put down, I would do that right now. I would just like hire the finest woman that I could find with different accents and
I think it's also, and I saw this recently, I think this was, I think it's for PacSun, if I remember correctly, the very first artificial AI social media influencer has been created. And so I think of like Mars being like money and stuff that you can get from other people, and it can also be like relating to like something that's like edgy and like very independent. In Gemini square Neptune is like, where are we creating these like fake personalities that are artificial and with the squares to Neptune visually stimulating, and it seems like a real person and there's a voice, but like it's not real.
Imagine like a mod influencer just being more popular than you and you're not even real. Like it's just some programmer. It's like inputting what
I have a theory there are some people out there in society that are not, I mean, they're not real. I mean, we've heard it time and time again, like life on Instagram and like reality. And I think a lot of people are going to be swept up in the like, oh, how it looks on social media versus reality, and like what we're reading on social media versus reality. And yeah, I'm excited to see what happens. So I would just really pay attention to like when that ingress happens on the 20th, just know that like miscommunication is in the air with that moon in Gemini square Neptune. Mercury's in shadow. It's getting ready to retrograde pretty soon. The first major aspect that I just wanted to touch on is probably, well, there's a few. One is going to be like when Mars hits 6 degrees from August 30th through, let's say, September 2nd. Mars is in a sextile to Jupiter. We're still pre-shadow, so we're not feeling the effects of the shadow yet. Mars sextile Jupiter is like, it's very big dick energy to me. Like, that seems like very like, oh yeah, like, yeah, it's like walking
That's a
along talking
huge
the talk.
boost. That's
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
So you're getting a little support wherever Aries is in your chart, and it's boosting up Mars, and it's kind of like
the machismo behind
Yeah.
what you say. Yeah.
I like
love
that.
That's what's up.
It's a short transit, but we'll have it for a little bit. Then we're also going to see that on the other side of the spectrum, Mercury in Libra is in a trine to Mars. So that's
grander.
kind of cool, having that air trine. I mean, Mercury and Mars are kind of like really adamant about, yeah, let's do this, let's work together, this is happening. But then Mercury's getting ready to turn retrograde.
It's projecting and directing how to say. So Gemini is like the assertiveness with Mars of what to say, and then Mercury in Libra is how do I direct that socially to say it. So I feel like that coinciding with a Mercury retrograde is reevaluating how we present the facts that Virgo season is revealing. Because it's like, oh, I was telling you earlier that this research based on what was actually compiled was real. Now we know with real details it's real. So the way that I tell you it is going to be completely different. It's going to be a more conviction, boldness. It's like, see, I was right about this. I was right about that. I was right. You know what I'm saying? So like, whether you're right or wrong, it's just really preparing and reevaluating how you connect, because this period is bringing, I think, some of the greatest twists in what we've been going through for the past 2 years.
It may take Mercury to dip back into Virgo and trine Pluto to go and get all the fucking...
For it to hit.
For it to go and get all the receipts.
Yeah.
That's kind of the feeling that I'm getting. The Mercury
Because now
trine
you'll know
Pluto.
what receipts to look for.
Yeah.
Because where it went, I love how you put it, because it's like we would have seen the receipts, but now when we go back, it's like, oh, that's what that was.
Yeah.
Oh, that's how to look at that. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
So then by the third, Mars is already in shadow, so you may start feeling the effects. You know, just kind of short, in short, I guess I would say, like, when Mars is retrograde, it's turned inward. So we have more frustration. We have more lag. We're not as direct. We have to find the courage. We can fight more. We can argue more. There's mental frustration and stimulation. And I think a lot of this can be as a result of us talking too much, juggling too much, multitasking, double dipping. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of double dipping because Mars has associations with sex. So I can imagine that with, Mars sextile Jupiter, there's a lot of like exchanges going on and like making things really big in terms of like sex and passion and intimacy. But as soon as Mars starts coming into this square with Neptune, it's like, wait a second, maybe I've changed my mind, or like, let me see what else is kind of going on. So I think, especially with like masculine energy, I'm not going to say men, but masculine energy, comparing it to like the Venus retrograde in 2020, like there was like a lot of changes going on with women, and like women were changing their style through that Venus retrograde in Gemini, or they were changing how they were thinking or how they were talking, or we were just more in tune in a feminine sense to the fact that we can love more than one person. Mars going retrograde is like we can fight more than one person, we can fuck more than one person. Like there's like a sense of like things can be things can be difficult.
You mentioned the masculine, and one individual who's huge right now is Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate has Uranus and Saturn on his sun, and he's been innovating systems and, very controversial. Like every criticism people say about him, I'm like, no, he's just a Sagittarius. Like people's like, he's outlandish and he says wild things. I'm like, no, he's just a Sagittarius.
Oh, that's the guy that everybody says is like
the top G,
total sexist piece of shit who talks about how women need to be handled.
But really, it's like he's not. He's just Saturn's sun. He's just Saturn's sun, Uranus, Sag. When you understand that, you understand, oh, okay, it's not that he's some misogynistic sexist. He's a Sagittarius male. And once you understand...
Yeah, but that's a blanket statement saying that if you're a Sag, you can be a fucking sexist piece of shit that like backhands women.
So no. Okay, so not every Sag is a sexist piece of shit. But people who come off that way might be Sages. So like, he has moon in Gemini, right? So like, I understand.
Moon opposed Uranus. Obviously, his mom pushed him around a bit.
No, like
so did Daddy.
He comes off that way. I think like Kevin Samuels, he's very misunderstood because the way he says things, like a Sag, he knows the effect of it.
Right.
But like Saturn, there's an integrity to what he's saying. It's just he's very Sag wild with it. It's I mean, I'm not gonna agree with everything he says. Like he challenges my viewpoints, but like
his Sun, Saturn, Uranus is basically breaking things down and being like,
and then
here's
Uranus,
the most rebellious thing ever is the fact that we're gonna be like super old school and like that's how
traditional. Right.
That's like,
and he just
women
has a
need
wild
to know their
approach.
place, fucking bullshit, and like.
The reason why I like that is because it challenges women. Like he said something that he said. Like there's certain things he say that I respect because it challenges me. His view about women shouldn't have a job. Like women should just be. I don't agree with that.
He also says that you should go for young 18, 19-year-old women because they haven't fucked as many men and they're going to be more submissive.
What he's saying is so outlandish. It's so wildly outlandish, like Sagittarius. And the reason why I love that is because it challenges the rest of the collective to challenge that, to speak against that. So being that his Mars is going to be affecting the moon, I feel like that.
I feel like women are going to come for that motherfucker.
They are. Just like they came for Kevin Samuels. And that's why I appreciate him, because he's a disruptor. Just like Sun, Uranus, Trump. He was a disruptor. So when I talk about people like this, they think I support them, and I just more I like what they represent. And I feel like his influence on the manosphere and masculinity, this Mars in Gemini is going to bring to a climax people like him and drive that narrative to its climax.
So if he has Sun, Saturn, Uranus, and Sag, he's like 86, 87, 88?
That's a good question. He's like,
So he's got the Chiron opposition.
He's like 86.
So he's got Chiron in Gemini and
opposition. He's got Chiron in Gemini.
Conjunct his moon.
Yeah.
He's got mommy issues,
and
hence why he's a fucking dick to women. I mean, like, I've listened to it. I get it. I understand. I have a Venus in Capricorn, so I'm super traditional in some sense. And, like, also part of me is fucked up, and I'm like, daddy. But
the moon in Gemini is the childish nature of it. He doesn't come at it from a more mature soul adult way, because he has.
No, and he knows that he's gonna get people talking, and that's gonna bring him attention.
He knows what to buy exactly, and he has people sharing and reposting what he is. So he knows what he's doing, but he really does stand by that too, and that's where like he has the top G maturity, and everything that I'm saying about him is an archetype for the masculine, and Mars in Gemini is gonna bring vocalness to this whole manosphere thing. So like, he's a multi-millionaire. He stands by what he lives, but he comes at it from the Gemini moon childlike perspective. It's still very childish. It's still not necessarily, like with saying stuff like that. He's sincere. He's very truthful. And I like that because that triggers people. And that's going to make people talk. And he knows what he's doing. But as far as like, that's why I wouldn't necessarily agree with most of it.
I'm just interested to see just like that group, I mean, obviously if you have any planets in Gemini, you're going to get dinged by it, but that 86, 87, 88, I think it's 86, 87 that has the Saturn-Uranus conjunction in Sagittarius and the Chiron opposition, it's really going to affect you because you're going to actually be seeing where like words can be hurtful, and like there's some karmic ties to that in terms of like how you communicate. And they're having the opposition
with Uranus, Saturn, and Gemini. So all that's gonna kind of crescendo there. It'd be interesting to watch people and figures like him. But like as far as that whole manosphere culture, we're gonna see that reach ahead and climax to the woman who are for and against it, and that's gonna be very messy and entertaining to watch because I feel like there's been such a bubbling of this like, men and women kind of sharing their ideas about social dynamics, and it's all coming to a head.
I also feel like, Mars and Gemini is definitely turned on by people who are like intellectual, who are smart. They can stimulate the mind. And I think what's going to be really interesting to watch is just like how we bring up the discussion of like breaking down like what it means to be a man and like to be masculine, and that a lot of men are like, oh, fuck bitches, get money, blah, blah, blah. I say this, I run my mouth, but like, some of these guys are not actually going to be stand-up men. Like, if you're going to catch some of these punks in the street, they're going to fucking run. They're not going to square up and they're going to fight. They're not going to do the things that they need to do in order to communicate and stand up and, like, be a good partner.
And a lot of what you're seeing is a lot of these men didn't have fathers. So this is the only father figure they're seeing on the internet.
Yeah.
So like, a lot of these men are following men who have millions of dollars, who have a certain lifestyle that they don't have. So you can't really follow that advice. Like if that man says he does that, you don't have that kind of money to follow the advice he's saying. So
and
it's
they're
very
exploiting
misleading.
the fact that they have money and that they flaunt their masculinity in a way that's very immature. And the squares to Neptune says it may look cool, but really they're bitches. And also you're going to see that with some of the oppositions that it can lead some of these people into some really hot legal water.
And so here's the most important thing about what Candace just said, because that Mars square to Neptune is going to expose who's saying things that sound smart but it's really just bullshit, versus who's saying things that are actually true. Because a lot of people will fall for the bullshit, but it's going to be more evident that what you're listening to doesn't have any basis in reality during Virgo season.
Well, I think, Mars and Gemini is street smart.
Right.
Mars and Sag is book smart. So I think that you're going to
Okay.
see a lot of people that are actually really using their words intelligently, and they're learning how to read the room versus just like preaching and telling people what to do.
And people who know what to say to rile the right people. So they're not saying the truth, but they're pathos. They're connecting to your feelings. And so they're preaching to the choir. And yeah, I think that's all coming to a head.
One thing also that I think is interesting to watch maybe is going to be like when Mars and Venus square, because you have the South Node Lord Mars and the North Node Lord Venus in mutable signs squaring each other. So I think that could represent, a bit of like a turning point around the 15th.
It'll definitely, I think Mars and Venus squares also bring into highlight the masculine versus feminine debate, because now with the advent of social media, you have this illusion that men are fighting women. You know what I'm saying? This whole manosphere thing versus women who clap back to that or agree with that. I think it could get really messy. Like, it'd be really interesting.
It's definitely going to get messy with Venus and its...
There could be trends.
Venus
or
and its detriment.
Certain things that people kind of argue about, like, is it right for a man or a woman to do this? And the thing is, that narrative is changing now in a transhumanistic age where you aren't really your sex. Like, you can be any sex you want to be. You know what I'm saying? So, like, this is all going to bring all these dynamics specifically that
bring
kicked
up
in
a lot of stuff
2020.
for trans.
Yeah.
Trans stuff and debate on, trans rights, and also just, I think gender
politics,
identity. And yeah.
So that'd be interesting. We're going to see something change considerably. Like, a new narrative is going to start to form based on what we've been talking about the past 3 years. And it's both terrifying and fascinating because Neptune's involved. So little to no one will really know what's happening until the fog dispels.
And motives are also not entirely clear,
Yeah.
or our direction forward. And like a fork in the road is very Gemini. It's like, do I go this way or that way? How is it going to pan out? We don't know.
So the presence of people who have Sagittarius in their chart and progress Sag, like Scorpios, like you, like y'all are the only ones who really see how it's all connecting. Versus everyone else who doesn't have Sag is literally in the dark. Like, they're not going to see what it means. So that's going to also be interesting, because what kind of subterfuge is happening? Who's being a victim of a smear campaign versus properly being exposed? And this is that kind of transit that brings the dust, but the dust won't settle until after the shadow period. So just be mindful. Don't be too reactive during this period. Literally just be present.
And I would just say watch for like just getting angry about stuff without having all the facts, or like assuming things and then like spreading stuff without really like...
Case in point, like she can see her partner with somebody and start thinking, oh, he's seeing somebody else. But the whole time, factually, he's getting a surprise birthday gift for her. And that's where it's like, you have to be careful what you see, because you need all the facts.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So then we have Mars that is getting ready to come into a trine with Saturn, which I think is like probably one of the better periods, to be honest with you. You're going to start feeling that around the 24th of September. It's reactivating that 19-degree eclipse that we saw at the end of 2020 around Thanksgiving. So it was like the end of November, beginning of December. So think about what conversations you were having, what was taking place then. I like that when it reactivates the eclipse, it's going to be in a trine to Saturn, because I think that's stabilizing. I'm also looking forward to then seeing when the Sun and Venus are coming up in degrees. And they are also trining both Saturn from October 11th and a trine to Mars. Pretty beautiful from like the 11th through the 18th. That's my favorite time in the Mars retrograde period because I feel like it's the sweet spot where we're getting those trines. We're able to communicate, harmonize. It's right before the eclipses when shit hits the fan. And it's also going to be before we start seeing the oppositions moving into Sagittarius. And then we are in some very heated debates.
Yeah. I love that. The Sagittarius opposition square Neptune, people just being passionate about stuff they may not even really know what they're saying. They're just passionate about it. So that can bring, I love that this grand air trine with the Mars direct, I think will be so much clarity. You'll know exactly what to move forward with who, and Saturn is literally strengthening that connection. So,
and the cool thing is that Saturn's actually retrograde during this point.
Yeah.
When Mars retrogrades back, Saturn will be direct.
Yeah.
So Mars is moving forward, and then it's almost like whatever actions have been put forward, even though you've said certain things, Saturn's going to kind of be like, nope, you signed that. You agreed to that. You promised this. You said this. So there's going to be something that's going to be like solidified.
It's like it comes together. We're ready to move forward. Boom. Now Saturn moves back and we now start to solidify that. Like, yeah, I like that you brought in contracts because it's like what you said, what was agreed with. And then boom, we step into the eclipse in Scorpio.
There's the eclipse. And then we have Mars that is slowing down because it's going retrograde on the 30th. Happy Halloween. Fuck. Mars goes retrograde. That's like so like perfect. I imagine there's gonna be some really cheesy like slasher movies that might come out. I mean, a Mars retrograde during Halloween. I'm a fan.
Let's talk about Pluto at the end of Capricorn. What if there's some kind of terrorist attack?
Let's talk about the quincunx. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the quincunx. Like, what if there's some kind of like event that makes it unsafe to trick or treat?
So I've done some research, and I've noticed that in Mars retrograde periods, there was a lot more car bombing. There was also a lot more like cars getting hijacked. There was like a lot more like car theft.
We know Mars and Aries brought a lot of shootings. A lot of people dying from shootings.
I think we're going to see with like, you know, Jupiter going retrograde, which is about law. It is in a slight square to Mars. Mars is what can literally kill or harm people, and it's what you hold in your hand. I think it's going to be about like what is considered self-defense. I think a lot of people are going to be feeling like it is more challenging maybe to defend themselves. I don't know, but not a fan of like the day that Mars goes retrograde and both the Moon and Pluto quincunx Mars. Like I have a feeling that there's going to be like a lot of campaigning for midterms on gun control.
Yeah.
A lot.
That's going to be a huge focus. Yeah. That might be the big push that leads into more civil war rhetoric, because Mars in Gemini is going to be the decisive split that's going to lead into a major conflict by the time Mars comes back around. So it retrograding, I feel like, is people picking their sides globally for this whole civil conflict. And personally, I think that light square from Jupiter is going to reevaluate things that you didn't think were possible that you will now see is possible to act off
Jupiter
on.
square Mars, too. Jupiter and Pisces square Mars is like, I was afraid they were going to do this, so I shot them. It's going to be like, fuck. Like, I mean, I don't like saying that, but I mean, we're going to see extreme weather, lots of problems with flooding, lots of issues also with like neighborhoods, I think, being quite chaotic with that Mars retrograde square Neptune. People panic, being like, can I trust my neighbors? I don't feel safe walking in my car type of stuff.
And I like the whole concept of actions taken that we won't realize till the retrograde is over that it was probably not the right thing to do.
Oh, yeah, there's going to be, I agree with that. I think it's a lot of like, in retrospect, I should have reassessed the situation rather than stabbing my boyfriend type of shit.
Right.
No, but like literally. Like literally.
Yeah.
Especially with planets in the late degrees of Pisces. Like people go fucking crazy when that happens.
And we're not going to have a 29-degree Jupiter in Pisces until 12 years.
And we won't have it in conjunction to Neptune again
until
in
like
our lifetime.
165 years, yeah.
So
or 156. So that's huge.
So then Mars is going retrograde. I don't have a lot of good things to say during the mid-November period because there's another eclipse and we've got Sun, Mercury, Venus.
And I mean, we know what happened in the 2020 election, so this is going to be like that on
So
steroids.
also Scorpio, right? Like Gemini is 8 signs to Scorpio. So it represents the 8th house of like digging for data, getting the receipts, getting facts, like calling out like falsehoods. And on the flip side to Gemini, like Scorpio is 6 houses away. So I think of like accidents, health problems, illness, like sex industry for sure.
For sure. There could be a new OnlyFans. There could be like a new acquisition. Like I really do feel especially in tandem with the Pluto Scorpio, Pluto Sag, Pluto Libra generation, a more accessible way to access sex. A more mainstream way to make less taboo the act and more mainstream the act. Because we're moving away from that religious influence that demonized it. And whether it's like a whole villain era or whole phase that the collective goes through, I think there's going to be we're going to start to see the beginnings of decriminalization more. You know what I'm saying? Of maybe, I wouldn't even say prostitution, but like escorting and all that kind of stuff. But this is going to be, I don't think it's going to be in the government. I think it's social movements, trends that kind of bring this more into awareness. So interesting time to be a sex worker for sure.
Then we're going to have Mars continue to go retrograde. Very uncomfortable with those quincunxes and conjuncts in mid-November. So I think I would watch for that because those two are going to rub each other the wrong way. Mars goes retrograde, comes back into 22 degrees where it's squaring Neptune around the 18th. So a little lost in terms of where we're going, you know, redirecting ourselves. It kind of reminds me like the Mars square Neptune is like, you know, when you're like driving on the freeway and Apple Maps is acting like a dick. And it's like rerouting, and you're like, where am I going? And you're like turned around, and then it like keeps doing that. Like that's the Mars retrograde square Neptune. For me, it's going to be like, I thought we were going here, now we're going there. And like not really knowing what direction we're in, and we're in like a cosmic washing machine.
And also now having to expand concepts beyond what you're able to perceive. But the sun is trying that, so you'll be aware of the wisdom to kind of like, it's such an interesting period. And I think we're going to be dealing with stuff that right now is beyond our understanding. You know what I mean? Like the concept of a world war, or the concept of the economy completely crashing, or the concept of the economy surplusing to where everyone has $5 million in their account. Like crazy shit that might either begin to lead to there or climaxes like that. So, and that's all going to happen Virgo season. So by the time we reach Scorpio Sag, Jesus Christ, like.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting time. The Mars retrograde, returning to 19 degrees, reactivating the eclipse point, trine Saturn. Now Saturn is direct. Really interested in, like, once again, like, going to be an interesting end of November 2022, the 27th, 28th. Those days, trine Mars fascinate me a little bit because you have the trines to Mars. That's like, oh, the heavy commitment and how we communicate and talk about it. Like, I think we're going to see there's a lot of room for, like, growth and maturity through learning to have difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And doing what's best for everybody involved and, like, kind of just clearing the air. But you have all these planets in Sagittarius that are making opposition. So where you have, like, Moon, Saturn, trine Mars is, like, this is the right thing to do. It's opposing Venus and Mercury. So it's going to be, like, us having to speak out and, like, doing the right thing. And standing up for like other people or like going against like certain narratives. So that to me looks uncomfortable with Mercury opposed Mars and also Venus opposed Mars, which is great for like some sexual tension. I don't know, December 1st.
But also that Mars-Venus square coming to a head. So that's going to bring...
With Neptune, yeah.
So everything that starts at the beginning of this retrograde, by December, it's climaxing. And everything that I love about what you said about this opposition is, I think this is where globally we're going to see a collective turning point to these narratives.
I think we're going to start to see where the wool has been pulled over our eyes.
Exactly.
And I think we're going to realize that there are some things that we need to take legal...
Which will probably happen Capricorn
season.
Yeah.
I mean, I just would say, like, those of you guys who have personal placements in Gemini, like, think what was happening in summer of 2020, and then also in the fall of 2020, and then again in the summer of 2021. Like, if something that you aligned with is not honest, if it's not true, if it's not what your heart really is involved in, there can be some very difficult separations and severing and, like, cutting and, like, Mars and Gemini is like that harsh reality, that harsh truth that you need to hear. And it's like, oh, okay, I needed to hear that.
Yeah.
You know?
Especially with the bluntness of Sag. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
The Neptune can make it be taken the wrong way. But, I mean, Yeah, that narrative turning point is going to change the way we all address how the wool is being pulled over, and the revolution of the individual is you. So instead of collective mandates or authorities dictating what's happening, it's you. You know, people with personal Gemini, you're making individual actions expressing truth that will affect society and the collective. And each of you individuals doing that crescendo and create this 100th monkey effect. So
well, look at this full moon in Gemini, conjunct Mars.
Damn.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
That's
it's conjunct Mars retrograde.
That's
Damn.
gonna be some shit. The moon.
Square
Yeah.
Juno and Pisces.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That's gonna be something to really watch, especially just because, you know, Mercury, I think, moving into an Earth sign, it's a little stabilizing, but it's square Jupiter, so it seems like really big news and like big ideas.
What do you think about this? Because personally, Mars at this full moon is now directly manifesting the conjunction it made in Taurus. So what does that effect look like? What happened in the conjunction, and what is that going to manifest?
How do you figure that's manifesting the conjunction made in Taurus?
Yeah.
How do you figure? Because the moon's exaltation is in Taurus?
Well, no, my bad. So like Mars conjunct Uranus, right?
Yeah.
Ooh, that happened like a few weeks ago. So this full moon in Sag is going to manifest the second house of Mars to Uranus.
Oh, okay, I get what you're saying.
So I can only imagine what effect that will be, because we're gonna start to see the tangible effect.
I think for a lot of people, it's realizing that we need to be more mindful of our money, our documents. I think a lot of it's going to be about keeping records and stuff relating to taxes, keeping receipts, trying to find ways of having more than one income, and trying to focus more on bringing more like streamlines of income
and dodging
coming in.
the armed IRS agents that'll be coming for you. That'd be interesting.
The whole thing is just so
The
fucking
whole
ridiculous.
thing, yes. And I feel like it's gonna enter a new stage of ridiculousness. That could be fun.
Well, I mean, a
depending
full
on how
moon
you
in
approach
Gemini
it.
already is a little bonkers, but I mean
With
that
Neptune and
that
Jupiter,
conjunct Mars, and you have to take into consideration the moon represents everybody. So a full moon conjunct Mars is like everybody's like having it out. You know, everybody is going to have something to say, and they're going to be pushing back against something.
Relative to Saturn in Capricorn 2020 and everything that was a talking point, now we have more analysis and means to finally fully vocalize our ideas to crescendo into a whole new narrative before Saturn goes into Pisces. So this is like, if you like sitcoms or movies, this is where we get to the climax thriller. Like, I'm looking forward to this period. Then the final boss battle with Sun and Pluto, and the last time Pluto.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. I'm just watching, like, Mars will then, right during like what's getting ready to be the Mercury retrograde in Capricorn,
and then Jupiter
which will be
goes back
conjunct
into
Pluto.
Aries.
We see Jupiter go back into Aries, and then Mars is coming back to 8 degrees. So this is going to be the time to watch, because Mars will be stationing. So it'll spend like a month at 8 degrees, right? Because the retrograde's going to end there.
That's crazy.
So curious about.
It's a huge setup. It's like an arc. It's like everything's waiting, and then boom, Jupiter returns into Aries, and then Mars goes direct again, and we move forward with this new era.
So if you have anything around 8 degrees of Gemini from January 1st, so it's going to go direct here around January 12th, but it's going to sit at 8 degrees from the 1st until the 23rd, like 3 weeks of it at the same degree as the eclipse. So I have to look at this eclipse really quick because it's going to drive me crazy. So just so you guys know, we come out of shadow once Mars. So we're going to see some nice trines. Let me just backtrack.
In Aquarius.
In Aquarius. You're going to see some trines at the end of January as the sun is in Aquarius. Then Mercury will go there. But Mars is going to be in shadow until it hits like 26 degrees. So it doesn't come out of shadow until March 19th. Okay, wait, I have to look at this eclipse really quick before we finish, because I know we had an eclipse that was at 21. Was it here? When was it? So was it December of 2021? No, we were already having eclipses there. So then it was June? Oh, yeah, it was June. Yep.
10 degrees.
So this is the eclipse that I'm referencing. So we had a June 10th eclipse, and that was at 19 degrees. And then we had a eclipse here in Sag at 5 degrees. So then that means it was the one that was around the end of December. I know there was one that we had at 8 degrees. Yeah, it was this one. Okay. So yeah, so it was Thanksgiving of 2020. I'm not crazy. I was like, wait a second. I know there was one right around then. So the fact that Mars is going to come back to that degree, and Mars on the moon is like really kind of sexy and passionate and heated, I think it's going to be conversations where it's like whatever was being agreed to or being set up at the end of November of 2020, you're having to act on it now. Mars is coming back, and it's like, it's a lot of like heated, passionate, emotional conversations.
A lot of the initial ideas that you're like, this could work. Now it's like, we're doing it. I love that. Mm-hmm. And if we think about the November squares to Jupiter and Pisces, by the time Mars leaves the shadow period and trines Jupiter, you're a lot more clear on what you were confused about. It's like dispelling, you know what I'm saying? Like you're going into it thinking something about someone versus coming out of it realizing why it happened, because Pisces always answers why. So I think that's very significant that, you know, the retrograde that kicked in during Virgo season, or the shadow period during Virgo season, is now being released during Pisces season, and that's a huge like turnaround. That's a huge game changer. That's a huge like synthesis and full understanding, so that by the time it conjuncts Mars, boom.
I'm excited to see what happens. It's going to be
the turn of the century. It's
going to be a wild one. We'll be back. We'll do another video. So, you know, probably when we're getting ready to start seeing the retrograde happening in later October, we'll do an episode on that. We'll take it through the 12 signs. We'll talk to you guys about how it's going to affect each and every one of you. Until then, let us know, where is it taking place in your chart? Is it hitting any of your personal planets? Do you remember anything significant happening at the beginning of 2008 that impacted you? What do you think is going to happen? Let us know. Leave us your comments below. Give us a thumbs up. Share this video out there to other people who might be astrology enthusiasts.
Like and subscribe, and hey, you can join level 3, 2 or 1, 3 really, but like you can just, it's right there. Join button's right there. So welcome in advance.
Thank you guys for supporting the channel. Even likes, comments, shares, or join us during one of our lives if you'd like to get a reading. Otherwise, we will see all of you guys very soon. Happy Mars and Gemini season. Ah!